firstborn were chosen as the priests, as the servants of Hashem, until the unfortunate mistake that the Jewish people did, which is worshiping the golden calf, and that's when Hashem took it away from them and gave it over to the tribe, the only tribe that did not, and that was the tribe of Levi. But even then, you still have to be redeemed. A real, true firstborn is a process which is called Pidyon Haben, which is the redemption of the firstborn, okay, or literally redemption of the son, and that is Pidyon Bechorot, and that is by literally giving the Kohen, the priest, a certain amount of value, a certain amount of money, which was 5, and that we're not going to go. That's a whole topic in itself, which one day we'll get to when we encounter it in the course of the Parshiot, where you give 5 slaim, 5 coins, 5 silver coins, and it has a certain value. And now in today's day and age, I believe it's somewhere about $70 value or something like that. That's not saying that a life is worth that. There's a significance to that, but this is not the time or place for it. The point is, getting back to the eve of Passover, that technically speaking, the firstborn should fast. However, because it's the eve of a holiday, and it's not the most desirable thing to fast, especially if you have to go into making the Seder, you want to come in a festive mood and so on. In general, we refrain from making a fast day on the eve of a holiday, on the eve of a Shabbat. So there's a loophole, there's an easy way out. And that is, if there is a cause, a legitimate, halachic, legitimate legal cause for celebration, that overrides the fast, because it's not such a severe fast. And what is that? Well, of course, if there is a circumcision. And when there is a circumcision ceremony, then there is what's called, it follows that is a su'udat mitzvah, which is a feast of mitzvah. You have to eat, have to be at least this already is the green light to eat. Once you've eaten, you don't have to fast anymore. But how common would that be that a lady should get born exactly 8 days before and there'll be a brit? That's not that common. It's certainly not going to happen in every single congregation wherever there's firstborn. So the custom is that somebody, doesn't have to be all, usually it's the rabbi or volunteer, studies an entire tractate of Talmud and makes a completion ceremony, a siyum, on the morning of the eve of Passover. And the completion of a book of the Torah is so significant, it's considered to be such a happy festive time that calls for a su'udah, for a meal, for a festive meal. Thus, if you're present and you heard it, you're part of the party, you get to eat, and that's what happens. And that's really what happens. That's why people will go, where's their seal? Where's their completion ceremony? Like, wow, you're so eager to learn. No. And it's usually also, you think about it, everything is in a positive way. It's a beautiful opportunity. Here you get to study something and participate in someone's joy of completing an entire tractate. Now, nowhere does it say that it has to be from the bigger tractates, 150 pages or 110 pages. Many times, you just try to, if you need to do it just for this purpose, but at least you know one thing. Somebody actually has to sit down and study through all the entire tractate, which can be anywhere from 12 pages to 40, 60, 80. It's a study. It's an endeavor. So that takes care of that. Now, let's get to some practical things that we need to go over, and this is very, very important. On Pesach, we are prohibited from eating chametz, correct? Anything leavened. Anything leavened. That means not only bread and bagels, but anything that have a mixture of leaven in there, okay? Things that may not even look like leaven, but they may have flour in there, and by definition, they go into that category. Now, what many people don't realize, and again, all stemming from ignorance, lack of knowledge, is that the Torah doesn't only prohibit us from actually consuming it, but the Torah prohibits us from actually owning it, from having it. In the words of the Torah, it says, Bal yira'eh, bal yimatzeh. It should not be seen and it should not be found in your entire possession. Now, it doesn't mean that if there is someone else's chametz, someone else's leavened products in your property, that you're transgressing. Because in that case, if I own real estate and somebody has, They're renting, it's theirs, it's not mine, right? What it really means is, it boils down to, in plain simple English, is you cannot be in ownership. In fact, the penalty, I'm not talking about now the spiritual problems that one may have for not keeping a mitzvah, that's none of my business. But I'm talking about the practical penalty, an issue. This is a very big problem in many places. With the Jew owning chametz over Pesach, is that chametz, even after Passover, never becomes permissible. You're not allowed to derive any benefit from it. Because on Pesach, not only you cannot consume chametz, and again, chametz is leavened products, but you're also not allowed to derive any benefit. Even to the extent of, let's say somebody has a few loaves of bread and says, I'm going to use it for firewood, just throw it into the oven. So now the oven becomes more hot in days where they would use firewood. No, you can't do that, because you're deriving a benefit, not from the taste of the food, but from the actual object. You cannot do that. And that remains after Pesach. And thus, if a Jew owns a liquor store, if a Jew owns a supermarket or grocery store or anything, and doesn't take the measures, as I'm going to explain in a moment, to make sure that they are not in ownership of it over Pesach, then anyone who's observant, anyone who follows the law, cannot buy until the entire stock that they owned through Pesach has been totally, depleted, phased out. And that, typically, the rule of thumb is, you say you got to wait at least 30 days. Takes about, you want to say, depending on the size of the operation and the outfit. But that is really, could be a very big issue. So, of course, living here in Miami, most stores don't belong to Jews. You just go and you have to think twice. But when you live in an area where might be Jews, and maybe they're not observant. Maybe they don't know. Go to Israel, and they didn't sell the chametz, right? That's a big problem. And that's where I come to the sale of the chametz. And that's what we do. The question is, so am I supposed to take everything I own and throw it in the garbage or give it away? Well, maybe once upon a time when people didn't tend to store so much food and cookies, because they didn't preserve the food like we do today and so on. It was a lot easier. You just kind of wound down what you have and what you own in terms of leavened stuff, and the little you had left, you gave it away to your neighbor. A non-Jew, you can have it. It's good. You're good neighbors. And then the little bit you kept to burn on the eve of Passover, and that's it. And then after Passover, you started again. You took some flour, you took some water, you made new bread, and that's how you went on. But we live a more sophisticated life. You got cookies, you got cereals, you got this, you got that, you got canned food. I got to throw everything out. And what happens if I own a store? What happens if I own a liquor store? Just smash all the bottles and throw everything out? I mean, it's crazy. So what happens? That's where the sale of chametz comes in. And the sale of chametz is very, very simple. I know many people go to, that's like a halachic loophole. Call it what you want, as long as it's legal. Remember, you have a tax loophole, what's the rule of thumb? If it's legal, it's legal, and therefore it's right. It's not wrong. If it's illegal, it's not a loophole. It's illegal. You know what I mean? It gets you into trouble once they catch you. Right? With penalties. Correct? And my point is that as long as it's halachically stable, meaning it has all the works in place for it to be a legal transaction, you don't own that chametz. So what typically happens, I'm just giving you, and this is, please in no way, don't do this, don't try this at home, that you're on your own, because I myself wouldn't try it on my own. It's simple, but, like everything else, you can fill up your taxes yourself. Yes, you can. You follow the thing. But if there's any slight glitch, that's when you need a professional, correct? Well, this is more than that. This is, you think of the IRS, and I'll multiply that by, we're messing with him. So, basically, the gist of it is as follows. People authorize the rabbi, whoever the rabbi is, to be their representative, so it's power of attorney, basically. Very simple. By signing away, the rabbi should sell their chametz on their behalf. Typically, you put in the address of every known place you have. So people usually would put in, I usually recommend, your home, where you work, if you have a storage place, or usually typically add just for extra security measure, any place that may have it. You know, what happens if you give somebody a bottle of vodka, which is clearly chametz, it's made out of grain, for safekeeping. Right? You forgot some beer in the fraternity house, and it's yours. No one's going to touch it, so it's yours. It just happens to be not in your address, not in your workplace, but it's there. So anywhere that it is. Basically, the rabbi now will conduct a real transaction with a non-Jew, okay, who's kind enough to take the time and do it. This is not putting a curse, it's giving him an opportunity to help so many people. The non-Jew will now they'll draw up a contract that says, listen, I got all these people, they cannot own this stuff, would you like to buy it? Sure. Okay. He buys it. And, you know, it could be stuff that's worth millions of dollars. I mean, you think about it. If there's 5, 10 liquor stores in there, you know, just their inventory alone is worth, you know, tens of thousands of dollars. You know, and now, you know, if you accumulate all the homes and everything, it could be a lot. Now, all we need from you right now is a down payment. I can tell you from my experience, I bought a home, the bank owns most of it, right? I put a down payment, right? But that made it mine. You know, there's a lien on the deed, but the deed's in my name. So it's technically mine, right? It belongs to me, 5 kids. So, the only issue that actually could be a little problematic, and this is, I'm not going to bore you with all the technical details, is there's a slight difference in Jewish law between the way a Jew can activate a transaction and the way a non-Jew can. For a non-Jew, really, the only real way to make that transaction fully valid, okay, is by paying the value of it. So you pay $1, you get $1 worth. You pay $2, you get $2 worth. You know, money for the object. Whereas a Jew can do an act of acquisition and acquire millions or billions of dollars worth of something without even putting down a cent, just by commitment, because there's an act of acquisition that is actually valid. I mean, this is technical Jewish law, but the point of it is, what do you do here? Do you actually sit down with the non-Jew and tally up, and which non-Jew wanted to dish out a few $1 million, not knowing, what am I getting for this? I might have to go on a wild goose chase from one house to another to pick up a box of cereal from here, 3 boxes of cookies from it. No. But we want to just make it reasonable. So what happens is another Jew plays the role of financier. He says, by making an act of acquisition, I commit myself to pay the entire thing. So now, as far as the non-Jew is concerned, it's entirely paid up. As far as you, if that non-Jew should actually decide, I want to pick up all the merchandise, everybody's going to come after this Jew. Like, you got to pay it up. But that's a debt. It's no longer putting the acquisition in question. So, it's a full meal. And for the 8 days of Passover, and I must point out, it doesn't begin with the 8 days of Passover. It begins with midday on the eve of Passover. That no longer belongs to the Jew, it belongs to the non-Jew. It belongs to the non-Jew. Right after Passover is over, that's why you don't touch your chametz for a little while, unless you want to technically be transgressing the prohibition of stealing, because it doesn't belong to you. It might be sitting in your cupboard, it might be sitting in your pantry, but it's not yours yet. And it takes some time for the rabbis to immediately sit down with the non-Jew, they designate right away, sit down and say, okay, how about it? Do you want to pay up the rest of the money? Oh, no. You know what? I think about, I had 8 days to think, to clear my mind. I don't think this is a good idea. Okay, so what do you want to do? You want to buy it back? Sure, no problem. And they buy it back of them. Whatever, right? And that's it, and it's done. So for those 8 days, it didn't belong to Jew. That is, I oversimplified it, but that is really the whole spiel on the Seder Chametz. And it's very, very important to do it. Okay, the Rebbe actually asked that it's to encourage Jews to do it. Even if a Jew goes and says, well, I don't know, maybe I don't really keep it, doesn't matter, and I'll tell you why. Or, I'm sorry, it matters to try to encourage them to do it, because remember, the prohibition of not being in ownership of any whatsoever chametz is every second of Pesach. Every second of Pesach. So you have 8 times 4, 24 hours, divide those 24 hours by 60 minutes by 60 seconds. That's a lot. Every moment is another prohibition. So of course you want to try to help a Jew, prevent him from that. Okay? Yeah.
But let's say in our case, where we have very little at the house, you can give it away, right?
Yeah, but it's still advisable and recommended to sell the chametz. You'll be surprised how many products we have that may very well be chametz or a mixture of chametz. And what does it hurt? What does it worth? It's customary. It's customary. Some people do it, and you go to the rabbi, and it makes sense. It's before Passover. The rabbi needs to live too, so people, leave something for the rabbi. But it's not an obligation, or it's not an obligatory part of this thing. All you're doing is you're asking and you're authorizing the rabbi, which is his duty as the rabbi of the community, to do it on your behalf. That's it. And what does it hurt? Why not? You know what I mean? And it's interesting, just to show you an interesting story, true story that happened several hundred years ago. And it shows you also the selfless dedication that Jews had, even those who weren't very learned, even perhaps those that did not benefit from knowing enough Torah and knowing all the details of the law and understanding them, but they were God-fearing Jews. And in those days, in Europe especially this was, many, many Jews earned a living by living in the little villages, and they typically would lease everything was owned by, they call it the Graf, the nobleman that owned that vast pieces of land. And they would rent a mill, or lease the mill, or in many cases they would lease the tavern, which meant that they produced the alcohol, sold it to the locals. They had a little inn, a little place. They would have to deal with that, but they earned a good living, and that's where they lived. Well, this Jew, he came the morning of the eve of Passover, and he was looking for that non-Jew that every year he would sit down and make a transaction. He would sell him the entire tavern with the whole, distillery and all the production material, which all is full of chametz, and all the barrels of alcohol, everything. And of course, after Pesach, he would reward him with here's your keg, for free, and give him a couple of rubles. And this guy was always happy. But unbeknownst to him, that year, the new priest moved into town, who was, let's just say he didn't love Jews in particular. In fact, he really didn't like them. And he started to incite the people against the Jews, and telling them, listen, the Jew never had a problem with anyone, because people came, he'd give him credit, he was nice. He was just a regular average person, trying to make a living and trying to live and let live, right? But he started to incite the people against him. And we know, people started to distance themselves from him. And finally, when he came before Passover, he let it be known that anybody who buys the Jews, distillery for the duration of Passover, anybody who engages in that transaction is going to be cursed, and is not going to be allowed to do confession. Oh, it's like, it's a simple peasant people. And Jews looking away. Imagine, it's a couple of hours at a time that it becomes prohibitive, which is midday. You can't make the transaction afterwards, because remember, once it's prohibited, you can't derive any benefit. It means you don't really own it to make a sale over it. You just own it for the transgression, so to speak. And that guy's not home. And the next guy's not home. And the next guy. And he's running around town. He can't find anyone. And anyone who did find, we're too busy, and he just ran off. And the clock is ticking. Clock is ticking. And he doesn't know what to do. He's in tears. Now, you understand, this is his whole livelihood. He's got all this money invested in his inventory. All those barrels of rough and everything, all he owns, that's all he's worth. What is he supposed to do now? And there's literally minutes left. The minutes are ticking by. And finally he realizes that something happened here, and he's not going to manage to sell his chametz. But he's not one to go against God's word. He's not one to go and transgress. So what is he going to do? Quickly, he rolled out all the barrels, brought it out to the side of the road, and in a loud voice announced that this no longer belongs to me. It's free for all. Free for all. And realizing that he can't really stay there, and it's going to be really wild out there once everybody gets to that point. It's going to be crazy. You're talking about block party times a million. So I better get out of town. Packs up his family, gets on his horse and buggy, and he says he'll go to the next town to spend Passover there. And whatever will be, will be. Mm-hmm. And that takes a lot of courage. Imagine, everything you own, everything, it's out there. You're done. And then they're most probably going to rip the whole tavern and everything to shreds once they get, intoxicated. And after Passover, he made that difficult decision to come back, figuring whatever's left, he's going to pick up the pieces and have to rebuild his life again. And as he's coming close to town, people are waving to him. He's like, well, of course, they had a great party. They sobered up after all these days, No, and one guy stops him and says, you know something? You're a cheat. Me? No. When did I cheat you? He says, you don't really follow your religion properly. He says, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? He says, because we were really all convinced that you're like an upstanding religious person. You let everything out there and you put it out, and we heard you say it's free for all. Yeah, that's what I did. I mean, what can I do as a Jew? That's what I was supposed to do. I couldn't own it. I said, really? Very, very nice. You think God's stupid? He says, what are you talking about? He says, well, and those big giant dogs that you put around to guard it? Put any dogs. Turns out that for that selfless act, Hashem sent these big, massive dogs that guarded it. And as he pulled up to his house, no broken windows, no broken tables, everything was there intact. Of course, we can never act on that. That Hashem does what he does. But it tells you when a person sincerely from the heart. I'm just trying to illustrate to what extent, now that being ownership here, he was ready to give up everything, not knowing how he's going to feed his family, and he's going to be in debt now, and he's not going to have a place to live. But yet, he chose to do it as a true Jew. So I want to encourage you strongly. But it's just I have the forms downstairs. Well, you don't need me. You can even go on Chabad.org, and they have a sale of the chametz. There's no strings attached, and like I say, no one's coming to your house. Although, technically speaking, if the guy goes to the list of items, I want the cereal at that house, and he knocks on the door, and you go, no, I'm sorry, you can't come into my house, and you can't get your stuff. That means that sale wasn't for real. It was just a trick. It's a real sale. If he shows up in the middle, if the guy decides to open up the liquor store and back the truck up and just empty the whole place out, and you call the police or something, you got a problem. Now, after Passover, you're going to pursue him for the money. But the deal is a deal. Otherwise, you can't play both sides of this. You know what I'm saying? It's either it is or it isn't the transaction. But still, I promise you, there's no strings attached. No one's come. No, most likely, it's never happened yet. No one's showing up at your house. And if they do, try to bribe them with a piece of matzah and matzah ball soup.
Yeah.
They may leave. You never know. Okay? Anyway, next week we're going to do the next half of that, the actual Seder and going through all of that. Okay?